What should be on an IT support provider's transition list? So if you're considering moving to a new IT support provider, we've come up with a really easy way of making sure that you don't miss anything. Because often there's a lot going on around the support side of things, and maybe they're also promising you the world, but are they going to back it up with the correct contracts in place? And how is the onboarding going to work? So firstly, let's look at the contracts and the legal side of things. So firstly, you need to make sure what notice period your current provider has got. And that's notice period within the contract. So an example might be that they say it's 30 days or 90 days notice. Or if you're on an annual commitment, when is that key date? But then also, are there any other products or services that are stuck in commitment? So that could be things like broadband, phones, Microsoft 365 licenses. It's always worthwhile asking those questions and asking them to detail the exact dates that they're in commitment to and the notice periods on each of them, because they could be different. Then when looking at the contracts for the new IT support provider, there's a couple of things that you need to make sure are in place and crystal clear. The first one is, what's the SLAs, the service level agreements for the contract? So this could be, what if there's an absolute emergency, system down? How fast are they guaranteeing to fix it? Or whether it's fixing it or to just jump on the actual reported issue. And when we say the connection of the reported issue, have they got an automated ticketing system, which means that's enough? Or is it when actually someone's going to respond to them? The other things that you can also ask for is price lists. Because often IT support companies may go with a really low monthly cost, but then everything else is a lot more expensive. For example, we've seen some IT support businesses that don't do an hourly call out. They will only do a half day rate. So that can be really expensive if you've just got something small that needs to be done on site as opposed to remotely. So just make sure that you do ask those questions. What's the SLAs and what's the price list? The second is documentation and access, because you need to understand, what do you actually have access and admin rights to, or is it currently with your current IT support provider? An example could be things like Microsoft 365, where let's assume they've got admin access, but have you got admin access, or are all of the company's logins, are they all just standard employee access? So you need to really make sure you clarify this. Also then passwords on things like the services, so it could be things like your broadband, but also the hardware. So things like your broadband router, do you have admin access, and the current details. In theory, if they are rotating your passwords, then there's a good chance that you don't have access to them, and then it's finding out when you will get access to them once you've given your notice. The third element is data and security. So if you cancel the contract, how long are the current people going to carry on supporting you, but also giving you the licenses that you may or may not have paid for, depending on the rotation of the licenses? An example could be that you pay monthly for your IT antivirus. Depending on when you cancel and the notice period, is it suddenly going to run out, or will it overlap with the new provider? Obviously, what you want to make sure is that it always overlaps with the new provider, or the new provider is able to remove it and put theirs on a rotation. You don't just want the old provider to suddenly stop and take it off, and then your business will be vulnerable for an amount of time, which you definitely don't want. Then we look at hardware and asset management. So who's going to be managing all of the assets and the hardware, but also when will the transfer take over? When will the new people have access to everything? When will they be able to start supporting you? And when are the old people going to stop supporting you? Generally, we would always say it's good to have overlap. So let's say that you're paying your current IT provider until month end, then you're much better off to go with the new provider middle of the month. Then the new provider can start getting everything set up. And if there's any questions or maybe any queries that they've got with the current setup, then they can go back to the existing provider and then ask them the questions, because they're essentially still being paid, which means they should still then help. Whereas what you don't want to do is end the support, start with a new provider, and if there's no overlap, the new provider might have questions about maybe some unusual configuration or setups. So it's always good to have that overlap to make sure that you can always transfer everything across nice and easy. Then you look at service continuity. This is about coming up with what's the best date when the new support's going to start and the old support will end. Similar to the overlap, but it's just making sure that you're all geared up for that start date. And if there's any information that needs to be completed before that date, then it's making sure that everything's ready so that on that date, everything's accessible, and probably the new IT provider will want to install their new remote managing tools and uninstall anything that's left on the machines from the old provider. Then we look at communication, and that's usually your internal communication. How are you going to communicate to all of your team that you've got a new IT support provider, and how will they use that provider and get the most from them? An example would be with Syn-Star, we've got things like mouse mats, mugs, different cards that gives all the details of how those individual users can create a support ticket and get help. Whereas they'll be used to using and doing things the way that the old provider did, where there's a good chance that the new provider may work in a different way. So you need to make sure that you're clearly communicating that with all of your team, but also letting the old provider know the dates of when things will stop and who they can still talk to. And the final element is knowledge transfer. This is usually the biggest fear for any person that's looking at moving their IT support, because you just feel that your current provider just knows everything so well and it's just going to be a lot of effort to try and get that moved over. But in actual fact, depending on the new provider, this is where you really want to look and ask them questions on how their onboarding takes place. Because if the onboarding is literally, well, just give us a call when you need help, that is not a good new provider to go for. Whereas what you want is that new provider that's going to come to your site, they're going to look at everything going on with the network. They're going to take pictures, they're going to have tools that can really look at everything from a hardware and software perspective, and then start running updates and deploying all the different patches from day one. What you'll actually find is they probably know the network better than what the old supplier does. Because if the old supplier hasn't been out to your site for a while, maybe they're not doing the management reports and they're not doing a lot of the different things that you would want them to do, then actually the knowledge that you think they have is probably quite limited. Whereas with a new provider, if they've got up-to-date tools, then when they install these tools on all the different devices, they're probably going to have more information than what your current one does, literally from day one. So that fear, usually, it doesn't make a difference. So if you're considering moving IT providers and maybe there's something that you're just not 100% happy with your current one, then why not consider that smooth switch and transition to Syn-Star? But for more information, we've come up with a checklist that will help you really understand how a transition should be working. So please just click on the link.